I loved going to Cedar Point as a teenager. I always brought my cousin with me, and as I started to get into guitars, the prizes at the Get the Ring on the Bottle competition caught my attention. Because I needed a new guitar that had dual volume control so I could do Tom Morello turntable style scratching. I did eventually get other guitars, but I never won the one from Cedar Point. After visiting Gary's Classic Guitars and the Steve Howe concert, I took a trip up to Cedar Point to see if it was possible. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Well, unfortunately, I couldn't find where you could win a guitar anymore, so this episode is now The Guitars of Cedar Point, America's Roller Coast. I hadn't been here in about a decade, but I was quite pleased to see something called the Backbeatque that has live music performances and with some decorations to match. But first things first, when you enter, they've got guitar picks on the doors. I'm sure not a lot of people realize that's what those are trying to be. But then you're greeted with two guitars over here on the edges of the wall. At first I'm like, hey, sweet, that's a really nice creamy looking Stratocaster. But once you look at the headstock, you know this is just some cheapy import guitar. It's not necessarily the finest electric instrument ever created, and it just looks to be in such bad condition. Now, I do have to keep in mind, none of these are behind a glass wall or anything. Everyone can touch them. I'm not sure if this sticker was underneath the clear coat or something that somebody put on them, but then I noticed how they mounted these things to the wall. They just drilled it in there. So obviously just meant to be some sort of a decoration rather than a super awesome display. But hey, Cedar Point, if you ever want to change that, you hit me up. We can figure something out. Reviewing the video footage, I can actually see a branding now. It's a first act. So originally the headstock would have looked like this. And it didn't start as creamy yellow. It would have been a bit more of a crisp white. It's just aged a bit. How much is this guitar worth in 100% functioning condition? At best, about $100. So yeah, a non-functioning wall hanger with absolutely abysmal action. I think this is at a good spot. Maybe worth $10 now. But then they got my hopes up over here. We got a pretty nice looking import Les Paul. It's got a nice glossy finish. Tons and tons of fingerprints. Again, people can just openly touch this stuff. It's got a few broken strings. Looks like it's missing the toggle switch tip. Somebody probably just stole it. Again, they just drilled it directly into the wall. You can see it's a multi-piece top with the seam line showing. And it looks like somebody took the pick guard off of this one. To amp up the appeal for guitar lovers, I think it'd be really cool if they were to modify this to be like a Peter Frampton 3-pickup Black Beauty, and then maybe have like some other Ace Frehley inspired ones. But as we go up the fretboard, we can finally get to our branding. This is a pile guitar. I've never personally heard of those, but that definitely appears to be an older guitar, like within the past 10 to 20 years, because currently Pile does not make them looking like that, likely due to a cease and desist for being too close to the Les Paul body shape. They now focus on the Stratocaster style guitars. But man, look at all the spiders taking over this thing. Tons of cobwebs. So we had two very classic shapes. The next one is this ridiculous kind of Explorer meets Jackson style vibes. It's definitely a little bit more 80s influence, which is perfect for all the other decorations they've got around it. This appears to maybe have been signed by the artist. But I noticed Duncan design pickups, so they're not real Seymour Duncan invaders. They just kind of look like it. We don't have any strings on this one, and it's some sort of a Jackson branded Floyd Rose with all the patina. Looks like a master volume and master tone on this model. So this is based on the Jackson Series X Warrior model. I don't think that's exactly what this is, since there's not actually any branding on it. But those are like $600 to $700 guitars for their cheaper version, and they go up to a couple of thousand. But I did notice the inlays have this really nice shininess to them. They must be a plastic material. But the next guitars by the Checkouts kind of made me laugh. It gave me ZZ Top vibes. But they do have a story here of apparently some Cedar Point employees getting together and making this band and then disappearing forever. It's basically just an S-style guitar that has a bunch of fuzzy fur over it, which I can totally understand how that'd be cool for somebody who doesn't know a lot about guitars just to see the furry guitar. But you can still see where they mounted it to the wall. Of course, I had to check to see if the knobs still worked, and yes, they do. The fretboard could definitely use a little bit of a conditioning and fret polish. But whoa, I'm just noticing that for the first time. The dot inlays get all crazy. And then we've got some sort of a sticker on here. But I went back to the sign because I was curious what came after Electric Poodle, and apparently it's Fart. That's a hidden Easter egg for sure. Unfortunately, I don't recognize the headstock shape. Definitely some sort of a cheapy import that was just an art project for someone. But the next guitar right beside is probably one of the nicest ones that they have available for the general public to see nearly every single day. So it kind of reminds me of like an Ibanez or something, HSS Stratocaster style. It's got a really nice dark rosewood fretboard to it, still has all the strings. And then I was shocked to see such a gorgeous headstock, and it's branded Silvertone, something that most guitarists have actually heard of. Now, we usually think of like their older ones that Jimmy Page has used, but I like the sculpting of the headstock here. Reminds me of like the Epiphone Batwing headstock style. I actually found one on Reverb for about $150. This is the SIK1 model. Apparently it's from the 2000s, which seems to be where most of these other cheapy imports are from as well. Even though it displays the best, it makes me the saddest to see this one drilled onto the wall, because it actually still seemed to have been functioning, and not in that bad of condition. But after I thought, oh, that's all they have in here, I looked back towards the food and I noticed, oh no, there's another one right there by the heat of the meat. You could tell this thing's getting like some finish checking and stuff, because guitars, yeah, they're not meant to be towards a heat source, but this is a Black S style guitar, so it might remind someone of like David Gilmour's Stratocaster. They do have a PV amp right beside it, a KBA 15. I was kind of shocked when I looked that up and found out they're still worth about $100 used. But the guitar has a unique branding, Mahar, and that headstock shape looks familiar as to that other one that we were looking at, so maybe that's what that was at one time. I looked up the value of a currently functioning one of these, and it seems about $100 is gonna ship one to your door, and is also from that early 2000s era. After that, I thought we were completely done, but my wife actually saw a roped off section of the restaurant that wasn't operating that day because it wasn't too busy. Additional guitars hiding over there. So I asked one of the workers if I could, go underneath the roping, and I was surprised they actually said yes. But here's where they hide all the best guitars. Do you guys realize what this is? It's a very nice Epiphone ES339. So it's not the full-size 335, the slightly shrunken down, almost the size of a Les Paul semi-hollow, and it had this gorgeous natural finish to it. I'd imagine this is like a $250 to a $400 guitar, depending on its actual year of production. But don't be sad that this one got drilled into a wall. It looks like the neck had like some cracks up here. The action was absolutely abysmal. So this was definitely something that was probably just being thrown away somewhere. So they decided to use it as a wall hanger. But seeing an Epiphone up here, that was pretty cool, especially coming off of all the early 2000s import junky guitars. But then just around the corner, would you believe it? A legitimate Fender on the wall, jazz bass. Now, don't get too upset. It's a made in Mexico one, back when those were a little bit less expensive than they are today. I was trying to fix the strings for him because somebody had like way over tightened these things. The neck was just ridiculously bowed, but the strings would just never stay in place, so I think there was something else wrong with it. But when I said ridiculous, this is what I'm talking about. That thing was liable just to snap and smack someone in the face. That was under so much tension. There was definitely a customer playing around with that thing. But it did have a very nice, gorgeous burgundy finish. Again, you can see where they drilled it into the wall. But they definitely hid the nicest looking things all the way on the back. And you know what? It's just nice to see a bass on top of it all, since they primarily went for the guitar players. And if you're like, hey, what about the acoustic guitars? They do have an outside stage where they have at least one on the wall here. Unfortunately, the day I was here this time, there weren't any live bands playing. Otherwise, it would have been cool to interview them about their guitars. So instead, we'll look at this Carlos branded acoustic. Yeah, being left out in the elements. It's gonna have a whole bunch of stuff going on with its frets, neck, and stuff. Definitely looks well worn. Seems the Carlos brand has made many of instruments in various price ranges, but this one appears to be, around $100 in perfectly functioning shape. This one's purely meant for decoration, to be seen on stage, but I was actually surprised the action was not that bad, all things considered. And it had kind of an interesting bridge design to it, not what you always see. Slightly adjustable. And then finally, we have a semi-hollow outside, full-bodied 335 in style this time. Again, you can see those plastic inlays shining. The pickups definitely have an interesting patina to them, but everything about this says import model. And a potential to become a bee's nest, but I really wanted to zoom in on this fretboard, like, holy cow. That's pretty badly dried out. And kind of similar to that bass, it had much higher action even than the acoustic. But I did recognize this branding, Firefly. We've been seeing a lot of those be talked about recently, but this appears to be an older version of their offering. And actually it could have been worth about $200 in functioning condition. And then just for fun, right beside it, there's a saxophone. I can't really tell you much about it because that's not my specialty, but definitely appears to be some sort of a beater. That also got the ever so elusive screw into the brick wall treatment. But knowing that all the instruments are also secured in that manner, they've got all these other amplifiers out here. I wonder if they're also drilled directly into the concrete or if they just don't care if these things fly away. Some of the amps actually have some cool stylings to them. But I'd imagine they all have some sort of an issue, and that's why they ended up where they are today. But that thing right here is easily the coolest looking thing. It's almost like a little tweed amp. And apparently that fancy script says Esteban. I would have never got that out of it. But it's just a portable 12-watt guitar amp. Not exactly the video I was trying to do, but hey, it turned out to be fun anyways. Maybe they'll bring guitars back and I can win one, super ultra modify it, make it perfect to fulfill that dream. But I'll leave you with some silent footage of some other interesting decor that they had that I don't feel my commentary would bring anything to. Alright, I gotta chime back in here. With Blondie being featured everywhere, they actually served blondies, and I found that hilarious. Alright, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed. Do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and yeah, just take in some of this delicious candy. We'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.